I had another genius idea to become a multi-millionaire in STALZONE without ever leaving the base. You see, STALZONE has an auction house, and critically you can flip the most sought after items in the game, artifacts. These are what players use to make the real endgame loadouts by boosting specific stats like move speed or bullet resistance. But the kicker is, the best of the best artifact builds can run into even the billions of rubles, which is pretty nuts. So my idea was fairly straightforward. Find the artifacts that are in high demand but mispriced by players, look for them on the auction house, buy them, and then relist them at the price that they're supposed to be at so that somebody else can buy it for me, making a tidy profit in the meanwhile. One of STALZONE's great features is that the auction house only takes a 5% fee when you sell, and there is no fee to list. This means that it's actually quite easy to flip stuff on the marketplace without having to spend a fortune testing things out. The issue is though, I had no idea what these items were worth or what builds people really used at the top end. As it turns out, what is cheap is actually kind of hard to define. STALZONE's markets are thin and not very liquid, and the items are what finance people would call non-fungible. In Tarkov, a LEDX is a LEDX, they're all the same, and one LEDX is interchangeable for another, give or take the find in raid property. Got morphine, big splint. Oh, Letty baby! Letty, Necropharm for the win. Headphones, it's the XM2s. Double Letty! Oh, baby! Double LEDX! With STALZONE's MMO system, artifacts have all kinds of features that affect the value, making the auction more like buying a house. You can value each one of them, but every single one is a little bit different. At a basic level, you have what kind of artifact it actually is. This sets its base statistics and what it might be as you get better versions of the same thing. For those better versions, you have 5 different rarities. These have the same stats for the same artifact, but they are better as you go up through the rankings, from common to uncommon, special, rare, and finally exclusive, which is normally where you see the multi-million ruble prices. Next, you have upgrade level. This is where players can actually take the artifact and pump some energy into it to improve the statistics on the artifact itself. And this ranges from nothing upgraded at all the way up to plus 15. From here, you also have an identification system. Each artifact can roll a specific set of stats, some bad and some good. When you identify it, the artifact then sits somewhere in that range of possible rolls, which affects its value as well. To try to start to get a handle on this chaos, I started my journey trying to understand just one of the most commonly bought artifacts, helium. Players like this one because it gives you extra move speed and little downside other than a biological infection that can be offset with other artifacts. But we needed to reduce some of this complexity, otherwise it's practically impossible for a player without hundreds and hundreds of hours to figure out what is going on. So I tackled the simplest market, unidentified heliums and ones that are unupgraded within a specific rarity. For example, an unupgraded, unidentified helium is actually the same as another unupgraded, unidentified helium, which makes pricing a lot easier because the stats are yet to be rolled. This is effectively the natural state for an artifact because it's how you pick them up in the world when they spawn in the first place. As we said, an identified artifact rolls its stats, and a bad roll would affect its sale price quite a bit. As you can probably appreciate, the statistics here were starting to stack up, so being the nerd I am, I did a little bit of digging, and this is when I found this website. And in one fell swoop, the rabbit hole got even deeper. Here you can see a list of every artifact in the game, you can see the rarity on each individual page, how many sold every day, the minimum prices for each one, the average price and the maximum price, and also the actual order book in real time. Let the madness commence. Another one that's popped up on my search is this dumbbell. This is a little expensive given the amount of money I have in my account, but we'll go and have a look on the StarCraft DB. We'll get rid of exclusive. So now we're just looking at this one. This is the average price. So these guys are actually very cheap, but let's look at the minimum. Load a bit more, because sometimes the history is a little misleading. 1.2 million, 1.3 million. One did sell for 800k back here. 999,999, so basically a mil. 1.4 mil, 1.8 mil. What is interesting about this is the quantity. How many actually sell per day? There is only 2 or 3 that sell daily. Let's have a quick look at heal on special. So how's this been going? Special heal, min price, So 300k does look like a good deal, but there's a lot of 300ks in here. But with the 5% fee, that's going to take off 15k. There's quite a lot of risk. Frame is apparently good. On the past couple of days, the minimum price so far that we've seen is 130k. This looks pretty good. It's only just come in too. We'll buy out this lot, although it is damaged. We'll just have to see if someone's going to buy this. Give them enough of a discount, and maybe they will. If we put it at 149, maybe that will work. Make this one short, because I'm not sure if this is going to function. Interesting that the uncommon frames are actually about that price too. So I started scooping up bargains, at least so I thought. I decided to do a test trade first and found a helium for 102k, which seemed like a really good deal based on the stats that I've been looking at. I put this up for 113,000 and sold it for a very small profit after the 5% fee, just as a proof of concept. The next one on there was 125,000, but all the rest were a bit higher, so I grabbed this and stuck this up at 145k, making a more substantial profit this time around than the one before. Unfortunately, it suddenly felt really easy, and I figured that if I cracked this and could just scale it up, I'll be a multi-millionaire in no time. But after this first couple of trades, everything stopped working, and this is how I became the owner of 5 heliums. One listing in particular, I got a bit excited chasing the market up because it looked like a cracking deal at 230k when all the other listings were higher than this, up at 400 plus. But as soon as I listed it up in the high 300s, multiple listings came in underneath and this helium ended up not selling at all and the market dropped away. Where were all these other artifacts coming from? But this harsh lesson led me to connect the dots, and while I was watching the prices, I noticed something interesting, which is fundamental to STALZONE and its artifact spawns. Every so often, there is an eruption, a huge map-wide storm that kills players if you're out in it. Afterwards, for the first 30 minutes, there is a massive increase in artifact spawn rates. This continues at a lower level for another hour, and artifacts spawn near anomalies out in the world, so the more anomalies that there are in one place, the better the chance of you finding an artifact near them. So, naturally, I started mapping these with the notes on my in-game map directly, and I started using the artifact scanner that I talked about in the last video, which is one of the best things that I upgraded to so far in this game. And of course, there's alerts and charts for the eruption frequencies too, because we're all just nerds at the end of the day. But what does this do to the market? Well, it probably is obvious if you think about it for a second. You suddenly see a flood of artifacts coming in about 15 minutes to 30 minutes after an eruption, which pushes down the prices. Same number of buyers, but suddenly a lot of sellers. So I started tracking the eruptions, first to go out and search for artifacts on my own using my routes that were increasing in sophistication, just like this one. And at the end of the 30-minute high spawn period, I started checking the market for bargains as players dumped their finds onto the auction house, especially for those that I knew the best. You can see here, I've just loaded back in. It's 48 minutes since an eruption where I've been hunting artifacts for myself. And if we go to the artifacts here, you can see for this, these were going for about 140k, but now there's a whole bunch of deals down at 100,000, and you can see that these have only just come in. So I'm definitely going to buy this one out for myself, and we'll relist this one later at another time at a better price. I'm sure that I can make a profit out of this. But helium is only one of many artifacts. In STALZONE, there are just under 70, and each artifact has 5 rarities. And even then, the cheapest listing isn't necessarily what people will actually pay, which means you have to check the artifact page, look at the specific rarity, make sure they aren't identified, and make sure they aren't upgraded if you want to compare prices. Go to the web database to look at historical transactions, check the volume of trades for each artifact for that specific rarity to make sure that people do actually buy them every single day. You've got to look at the minimum sale price over the last few weeks that corresponded to unupgraded, unidentified artifacts that we were looking for, and scraping the historical transactions to make sure that these were correct. As you can probably tell, looking at one artifact at a time wasn't very efficient, and navigating between these pages and looking at all the information that you need to was taking a really long time for somebody who wasn't in tune with the prices of these items. Suddenly, I needed a lot more data, as STALZONE's market is, let's just say, complicated. The database could tell me what things were selling for if you dug through the numbers, but it doesn't necessarily tell you if something is actually cheap or not at a glance. So, with my descent into madness complete, I built my own market scanner to answer these questions, tracking multiple listings across the market for many different artifacts and ranking them by percentile based on the history of the prices sold. One of these just got flagged up for 55k, so we've purchased it. Here it is, in here. We bought gum at the auction. We take the package. Now we can go and have a look at the rest of them. This was an uncommon gum. We should be able to sell this back for 79k. We'll set the duration for different amounts of time. I'm going to set it relatively short, so it comes back if somebody else puts it up. If somebody else undercuts it and puts something else up. We can go back to the auction and have a look at it. And with the fee, this should make us 20k. How many gums actually trade per day? The logarithmic chart gets compressed by the exclusive ones at the top, so we'll remove this and probably rare as well. We can load more days. And we can look here. This shows us the minimum price. So we actually have just bought the minimum, 55,555. If you look at the transactions, this one just went through. This is the one that I purchased. The average price on these is more like 71,000. So hopefully this will sell. Success! We finally sold the gum. This is good. This is the one that actually makes some money. We've got 75,995 rubles. We've actually made some cash finally, 20k. If all of this has interested you as much as it did me, and you want to try STALZONE yourself, it is free to play. You can use the link in the description along with my welcome bonus code to grab some extra starter rewards, and if you're a veteran who's already playing, I'd love to hear your take on how I'm doing so far. So after all this effort, did it actually pay off? I would say probably yes. I finally took my account to over 2 million rubles, which in the context of the end game really isn't that much, but for me this is an account value high. Never had this much money in STALZONE before, and it's kind of opened up the gate to a new way to making money while you're also out in your raids. But now it was so much easier to figure out the prices of everything and what I should pay for them, and I've been able to grab a nice few artifacts cheap and relist them for some free profit while I'm doing other stuff. But the biggest problem that this cannot solve for is STALZONE's illiquidity. And by this, I mean that you can always buy something cheap and list it at a fair price, but then you have to wait and wait and wait. And although an artifact might sell 20 per day, that means that it's less than 1 per hour. And you have to remember that you're also not the only seller, and this is also going to depend on the player base at the time. The more players on, the more likely that it's going to sell. So at the peak player period, that's probably when most of the sales are going to go through. Something else to consider if you want to put these up on the market. To make any meaningful money then, you have to tie up your cash in more and more expensive items, but the turnaround time on the sales is the real bottleneck to profitability, rather than the gap between buying and selling. One of the great things about heliums is that they trade a lot per day. Go and have a look at the uncommon heliums on here. 10 have already traded today, 30 yesterday, 41 the day before that, and 36 the day before that. So a lot of them do actually sell. If we look for the uncommon ones, you can see them selling here at 200,000 and 120k and 120k again here. So they do occasionally sell at really high levels, but it seems fewer and far between. We don't know here whether it was necessarily identified or not. Maybe it had a good roll. 92k, that's a bargain. 1990, so the price is pretty cheap on there. I think it's probably worth trying to at least get out of one of ours. Now, because I'm struggling to sell all these and I've got a lot of inventory. Nearly an hour and a half later, no one has bought our helium. This is the big problem, the illiquidity of the marketplace. You need to be willing to spend a long time sitting around with offers out there that aren't selling. The plus side is it doesn't cost anything to list, you only pay when it sells. So you're encouraged to spam lots of listings. I guess that means that ultimately I'll actually have to go and, play the game rather than playing Spreadsheet Simulator, but frankly, That's probably for the best.